Welcome, everybody, for another installment of our Peer Story series. This is a series where we invite our amazing peers who have gone through a spinal cord injury, all the way from the rehabilitation process into where they are now. And they just want to share their stories and help those who have a new injury and are looking for some help along the way. And there's some amazing stories out there, and I'm so blessed and glad that they've volunteered their time to come and talk to us. And right now, I want to introduce our newest speaker. It is Brittany Nunez. She's been doing a lot of everything. She's kind of a mini celebrity in our community. She's got her own YouTube channel that she's been putting together and posting some amazing videos and content on how to help people with spinal cord injuries. And it's been an educational tool that I've used myself a few times. So I'm very happy and glad that she's come to join us. And so I guess I'll get right into it. So Brittany, can you tell me a little bit about yourself before you got injured?
Before I got injured. Well, I was injured at 13, so I was basically a boy crazy. Like all my friends were, the center of my universe. I loved sports. I played every school sport I could. I played baseball outside of school. I ran track. All of the things that could get me moving my body were what I loved to do. I would ride my bike everywhere because, hey, I grew up in the 90s and we didn't we didn't have our parents driving us places, or at least I didn't. So yeah, I was basically just I was in 8th grade, hanging out with my friends, living the life. Couldn't wait to be 14 because for some reason 14 was way sounded way more mature than 13. But yeah, I had just moved to a small town in northern Alberta called Grimshaw near Peace River. And yeah, was hurt shortly after I moved there. So
Well, there you go. You just kind of led into it. So that's a very young age, and it must have been really tough on you. So how did it happen? And can you kind of give us a little idea of what was your experience like going into that injury into the hospital and getting into rehab?
so I was injured in a snowmobile accident. I was invited to go snowmobiling with a bunch of 14-year-old boys without parental supervision, and I thought that was a great idea. Because all the boys went snowmobiling in northern Alberta. That's just what they did. That was their toys essentially in the wintertime. And so I asked my mom if I could go. And of course she said no. She's like, you're not going snowmobiling with a bunch of 14-year-old boys all by yourself. But she had a toothache. She had actually just had a tooth pulled. My dad was working away. She had a tooth pulled and she was on morphine. So I was at a slight advantage because she didn't feel good. So I wore her down. It took me probably like 40 minutes to beg and beg and beg. And she told me, fine, you can go, but you can only go snowmobiling in what we used to call the drainage ditch, which is just like a flat area of town right behind the houses. Like it was literally just like 2 minutes from my house. So she said I could go there. And when I showed up where all the boys were, and I took one girl just because I was like, I don't want to be all alone with all these boys. When we showed up, the boys wanted to go somewhere more fun. So they wanted to go out to one of the boys' acreages that had a bunch of hills and kind of show the girls how fun it was out there. Um, and of course, there was no cell phones back then because it was 1999. And I didn't want to go home and ask my mom because I knew for sure she was going to say, no, you can't go in that area. So I was just like, it'll probably be fine. I'll go. And, my mom will never know. That didn't happen. So we snowmobiled out to where the hills were. And I hopped on a snowmobile with one of the boys named Blake, and we took off. And that's really the last thing I remember. I remember stopping to warm up at one of the acreages in a Quonset that was heated, and we were just warming up, and then we took off. And I woke up 2 weeks later in the hospital to find out that I was paralyzed from the chest down, and that the boy who was driving the snowmobile I was on passed away in the accident that we were in. I talked to the other people that were there, and obviously people in my family that had talked to the people that were there, and the other kids really, we were all just kids. They found us at the bottom of a very, very steep hill that was very shallow on one side. Like it just looked like a little hill from one side, but then on the other side, it dropped down into a forest, an 80-foot drop into a forest. And nobody really knows what happened, but what one of the boys who was the best friend of the boy that was driving my snowmobile thinks happened is that Blake tried to do a little jump off of the hill, but he miscalculated what hill he was on, because he would always jump into a snowdrift on the hills out there and land the snowmobile onto a snowdrift. And he just was on the wrong hill, and he tried to do a little jump, but it was just down into a forest instead of onto a little snowdrift. And so we flipped upside down. Snowmobile landed on both of us. I landed on the ground and broke my back, and the snowmobile landed on top of Blake and broke some ribs. And unfortunately, that's what punctured his lung, and he passed away because of that. So yeah, I don't remember what happened, and I'm kind of glad about that. But I do remember waking up in the hospital to realize that I was paralyzed. And for the first little while, I didn't believe anybody that I was paralyzed, because I have phantom sensation. So I don't know what it feels like for anybody else to be paralyzed. And I've talked about this on my YouTube channel before, but I always, in my brain, my legs are always bent and asleep. So I feel like I have legs still. They're just always tingly and they feel like they're asleep. So I didn't realize that I was paralyzed until somebody actually lifted my leg out of the covers of the blanket in the hospital, and I saw that that was my leg, and I couldn't feel what they were touching. So yeah, I think it took me a couple of weeks to kind of let that digest that, oh, this is a real thing. And then honestly, my first thought was a teenager thought. It was, what boy is ever going to love me again, which is a really silly thought now, I think. But it was what was important to me at the time. And maybe it's not such a silly thought. I think a lot of people that are paralyzed have a fear of losing connection with the people that they love in one way or another, because they are now, a burden or whatever. So it was probably just my younger form of the fear of losing connection.
So that trumps my story by like 1,000. That's
Your
crazy.
story is one of my
Um,
favorite, though. I always tell it to people because I'm like, what, shit can happen in the weirdest
you jump
little
off an
ways.
80-foot cliff, and I had a doggy pile. Like, yeah, it's pretty much the same thing.
Exactly.
Um, but that's crazy, and the experience, and it must have been such a hard thing, especially when you're at such a young age, and you're now having to go through this mental battle that you didn't want and aren't ready to mentally ready to deal with, as well as socially. Um, so you wake up in the hospital, and I'm guessing up there, the hospital, the rehabilitation. What was that process like for you?
I was actually in Edmonton because the town I was in was so small that like they really had an emergency room, but they don't even really have like active beds for people other than like long-term care, things like that. So as soon as I was stable, I was airlifted to Edmonton. So I was in the Glenrose for my rehab, and at the U of A for the first couple weeks before I went to rehab. And I I I remember the first day going to rehab. I remember like distinctly uh getting transported in the ambulance to the Glenrose, and getting into my room and sort of being like, whoa, this is a different kind of hospital. What is this like? Because it had like a pool, there was like a pool table, there was like a TV room, there was like a kitchen, all these things that once my mom and I sort of went for like a little tour. I was like, wow, what kind of a hospital is this? And I was a little bit excited because I got to be out of school for months. So I was like, oh, yay, there's like stuff to do here and I get to be out of school. But I didn't really understand at that time the impact that a spinal cord injury really had on your body. And because I was sort of out of it most of the time, I didn't even realize that like I had an indwelling catheter. Like I was just like, I didn't think about how I was going to the bathroom or not going to the bathroom because I couldn't feel. So I was just like, yeah, until I realized all of that stuff and realized how hard rehab was going to be. I was just kind of oblivious and being like, oh, I get to be out of school for 3 months. Yay. And then once I realized the impact that, oh, spinal cord injury has a lot more to do with bowel and bladder and all of that stuff, then it was more like fear and like, not like self-loathing. Like, I don't know if it was that bad, but I remember making jokes all the time. Like if a baby came in, I would be like, oh, look, we get to wear the same underwear or whatever, because like I was making jokes that I was like wearing diapers and things like that. And that was like horrible for me because I was immediately thought that all of my friends were going to make fun of me, think I was gross. Then my boyfriend, because I had like a little boyfriend before I left, that he was going to think I was gross. So that my whole, I guess, mission was to keep that stuff private and not let anybody know that that ever happened to people with spinal cord injuries. So I still kept my social relationships and stuff long distance, but I was like trying to keep all of that like under wraps because I was really embarrassed about that. And you would think that would motivate me to work really hard in rehab to get independent and be able to like be a normal teenager, but it was like the opposite. I was like, I kind of dissociated from like the lower half of my body, and I thought using a catheter was impossible, like literally impossible. I would whine about physio all the time. I didn't really do what I should have done in rehab. So for me, rehab was um not the experience that I hope it is for other people after they're injured, a time to, really understand how to manage bowel, bladder, feeding, dressing, things that are like going to stop you from doing other things that you love, right? I hope other people focus on those things while they're there so that they can get back to some of the normal things that, you would want to do in life when you get home and get stronger in fitness and whatever else. But I didn't do that. And I had my mom stay with me the whole time. My mom literally had a bed in my room. So she was doing almost all of my care. And that didn't help because that just got us used to a routine. So rehab was good in that I made really good connections with like some of the nurses I had there. And all of that stuff, but I don't remember it being a whole lot of growth for me. And then I went home, and unfortunately my mom just started doing everything for me at home, which it stayed like that for like 4 years. So my first 5 years in a wheelchair and with a spinal cord injury were basically ones of just like not moving. Like it was like I was stagnant. I didn't know what to do, and very little growth, which I love being a slow learner because I eventually caught up. And now whenever I tell people that it took me so long to get independent, it makes them feel somehow better about their own timeline, because if they are very hard on themselves, then they realize that 5 years in the whole scheme of your rest of your life is not that big of a deal. And that even if they are taking a much longer time to get used to this life, that it's still possible.
Yeah, no, you raised some really good points there. It's a physical injury, but the people don't realize that the harder battle is the mental one sometimes. And
Yeah.
you're a teenager, and self-perception is one of the biggest mental battles that a lot of people have to overcome. And so imagine being a teenager. Don't blame yourself too hard, thinking that you're trying to, I wanted to hide this and it probably wasn't the best at it. Well, you're a teenager and everything's about self-perception.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for you to tackle those physical skills that you need to now tackle when you don't want to do them because you don't want, you're trying to hide that part to you. Accepting that part of you can make everything open up, all the doors open up, everything become easier. But that's easier said than done. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. You kind of went into the next question, which was what were some of the hardest things you experienced as you transitioned from rehab back to your home? And yeah, like I think a lot of people, they're in the hospital, everything's the same, everything's, you don't think about it. Um, but what was something you're now transitioning back home, and what were some of the first things, like we can change the question to you're now at home, so you don't get like the food's different, all these things are different. You're going back to school. What was the hardest thing for you other than the fact that you weren't kind of progressing in your
Yeah.
rehabilitation?
I think the hardest thing for me was my lack of confidence. So I was a very confident person before my injury. I thought every girl wanted to be me and I thought every boy wanted to date me. I'm not even joking. Like that sounds so conceited, but I was just a very confident person. I thought I was the best at every sport. I thought I was the smartest in school. Obviously I was 13, so it's the time where you're going to get knocked down a few pegs just by life in general, but I hadn't made it there yet. So I was really confident. I was always a teacher's pet, super smart in school, good in sports, like all the things and that I cared about, I was good at. And then after I was hurt, I immediately lost all of that confidence. So I went back to school as somebody going from somebody that I thought everybody liked me to I thought everybody didn't like me. And it was really hard to navigate that feeling inside that nobody wanted to be around me anymore. And I think that was the hardest part for me. Luckily, I did have sort of a boyfriend before I went into the hospital, as much as you can really have a boyfriend at 13. And he was amazing. Like he called me every day in the hospital. His mom brought him out to visit me in the hospital, and he was the nicest, like most caring guy on the planet for a 14-year-old. Like who is like that at 14, 15 years old? But he was. And so I went right back to school with him as sort of like my support. And I also had a cousin that was in my grade, that I was really, we were in the same friend group. So I had two people that I knew always had with me that would not sort of leave me. And that I think helped my confidence a lot. It didn't help me become independent or anything like that, but it did help my confidence a lot. But I still struggled with large groups of people. And if those two people weren't around, I floundered, like to the point that my boyfriend, I stayed with him all through high school. He graduated a year earlier than me. And I actually quit school, like in-person school, and took correspondence because I couldn't handle the thought of being at school without him there with me. So that lack of confidence was debilitating for the longest time. And it took me a really long time, even into adulthood, to regain the type of confidence that I had before I was injured. And I would say that I'm probably not as conceited as I was back then. I don't think every guy wants to be with me and every girl wants to be me. Certainly not. People aren't going to choose, I want to be a girl in a wheelchair. But I do have a quiet calm and a sense of like peace about who I am. And I have a lot of confidence now, but it was really hard to fight for that again, and find it. And it was extremely hard as a teenager. So that was the hardest part for me.
Yeah, well, and confidence doesn't have to be everybody wants to be you, but you make it look really good. And I think uh, girls will look up to you not because you're in a wheelchair, but because you are a confident person who's finding your way in life.
I hope
Um,
so.
and I think, and like I hate the things I hated. I remember being on a bus. I hated the bus
Yeah.
because you're looking back at everybody because the way they have you sit in the bus, so everybody's looking at you. The entire bus is looking at you.
Oh, I never
I was a
thought about
teacher
that.
and I hated being. I used to have no problem with my confidence in front of the kids, joking around, just being in it, and then I couldn't do it. I would do it, but I would suck at it. Like all of a sudden, I sucked at the thing that I was the best at, which was just standing in front and talking about whatever because I was in my head and I kind of lost some kind of relationship. I thought, we all get it back. Like you said, I just coached my son's baseball team and had the most fun I've ever had with children in a long time. And I didn't realize that it's
That's
that confidence you find
awesome.
yourself, right?
And really
Um,
like I it took me a very long time to get to that point where I see my wheelchair as an asset, but I really do
Hmm.
now. I can't
Yeah.
think of more how like I can't think of how many opportunities I've had because of my wheelchair and how great it's been to be conspicuous because people notice you and they
Hmm.
will remember you. And those kids that you coached, I bet you they will remember you forever, even though your son is little. They might not ever remember a coach that they had that was able-bodied, but I bet you they will remember into adulthood, hey, I had a coach that was in a wheelchair and he was awesome.
Wow, that's fun. Thanks, Bruno. So I think I know what kind of this, but and it's hard. You're a teenager, so obviously you wouldn't have been able to think of these questions. But now, if you could do your injury, your rehab, your transition back home any differently, if anything you could do differently, what would you do, and what kind of questions do you wish you had asked?
If I could change one thing, it would be working hard. Just getting up, not worrying about what it looks like when I get home or any of that stuff. Just whatever the day puts in front of me, if it's learning how to transfer or using a catheter or figuring out bowel routine or getting dressed or whatever the one task is that is put in front of me, just putting my head down and working hard at that, and not worrying about what it means when I get home or whatever. So I would change that for sure. Like just making the best of the time that I had in rehab. The questions that I would have asked there, that I did not ask were more of like the mental health thing. Like I would have asked or taken more supports. I don't know whether it was offered, but I would have asked more questions about like why do I feel this way? How do I overcome these like feelings of like jealousy towards my friends or other people that are able-bodied? How do I cope with not being able to do the same things that I can do and still be happy? Because that I think is way harder in the end than any of the physical stuff. Like you can learn how to go to the bathroom again and you can learn how to put your pants on, but if you can't deal with the fact that you have to watch other people do the things that you wish you could do and not resent them for it, that's a way harder thing and something that will probably make your life worse if you don't learn how to deal with it. So I would have asked way better questions about, you know, the mental health stuff. Um and I just like stuffed that stuff down because I thought I was weak and my mom, like my parents are really big on like gratitude and positive mindset and stuff like that. So my mom, anytime I would feel bad, she would go tell me, you're so lucky to be alive, like how can you know because I would whine about it endlessly, and I can totally see why she would be trying to make me feel better in that way, but I had to like go through it, you know what I mean? Instead of like somebody validating like this sucks. I know it sucks. Um yeah, and I'm sure she did that, but I just remember a lot of the you should be grateful that you're even alive to do this and stop whining about this. You have full hand function and all that stuff.
Yeah, and well, and that a big part of that comes from other people in the community too, right? I had three brothers, and my parents, my family's great and everything, but we didn't get deep.
Yeah.
We were more doers, not talkers. Played a lot of sports and all that kind of stuff. But and then, I was talking to a lot of my friends and stuff, and then we talked about who I was, but that didn't really help who I am now.
No.
It helped me remember who I was, which is good. Remember that I am a good person, confident person, all these skills I had. But it was till I hung out with the rugby team and started hanging out with people that I didn't have to explain, and they really helped me a lot. And then the other thing that I always tell people is time heals all. The more you do it, the less it hurts. And I'm not going to say it's not going to hurt, but every time I did it, it hurt a little less. I cared a little less.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think that more than anything has helped me. And it's not because I did anything. I just kept living and it got easier.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to, everybody has a different path and a different route, but sometimes it's just time, and that's all you need. Everybody loves to give advice. We love giving advice. That's what we're doing right now. But what was one of the most valuable pieces of advice you've ever received from a peer or doctor or family member or somebody?
So, this piece of advice has served me so well. Um, if anybody's watching knows who Margaret Conquest is, she's kind of a legend in the spinal cord injury community. But she was my first mentor, and my almost all of my life skills are because I met her. I should have met her way earlier, but I didn't meet her until I was 18, which sucks. But she changed the trajectory of my life. Like you said, hanging out with people that get it, because you can't make excuses to people that have been there before. If you say life is hard, they go, yeah, it's hard. I get it. And suck it up. But if an able-bodied person says that to you, then you can just say they don't know how I feel. So hanging out with people that really get it, that can really look you in the eye and be like, you need to do better, and will call you out. And she did that for me. But the piece of advice that she gave me when I was moving out of the house is don't make your spaces extremely comfortable. Like, don't live in a accessible place if you don't need to. Don't get all of the adapted things, because then it just makes it harder when you go out into places that aren't adapted. So she made me, not made me, but she recommended I don't look for accessible housing when I was moving out. So she just helped me look for regular apartments. So I got used to living in places that were almost like inaccessible to, like, they were not great. But I got used to doing all the things that I need to do in places that aren't necessarily accessible. And that has helped me be able to travel and go to visit other people. And it has just made me stronger in a lot of ways. So I love that piece of advice, because I think there's a level of almost being too comfortable as the world becomes more inclusive and there are more things for people. I'm not saying don't don't get things. Like, I have a lift to get in my van because I don't want to wreck my shoulders every single day of my life getting my wheelchair in. But I don't have a grab bar in my bathroom because I don't feel like I need it. But if there's something like that you need, pick the things that you need that are going to make your life as easy as possible and that are not going to like tax your shoulders, but push the limits a little bit in terms of accessibility on your bed height, things like that you're going to experience out in the world, so that when you get there, you can still survive without somebody there.
No, that's a great piece of advice. I definitely I transitioned from the hospital into a fully accessible condo that I rented pre-leaving, and had roll-in shower and all those things. And wasn't until my son was born, which is uh however many, 6 years, 7 years past my injury, we moved to Calgary and had to live in a condo while I was waiting for my house to be renovated. And that was the first time in 6 years that I was transitioning or transferring into tubs every day to
Yeah.
shower and do my bathroom routine. And I'm like, oh, this is actually ain't that bad. Like learning how to do it. And
Yeah.
then now so then when we went on trips and stuff and down to our cabin in Montana, I was like, oh, I can easily do this because I learned that. Normally I'd be like, let's just take a bucket outside. Now I'm like, oh wait, no, I can totally transfer into the shower and use the shower. And it was a skill that I probably could have helped my life a lot if I had learned it a lot earlier. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's those little things. So yeah, a little bit last question. I always like to end it. And maybe you could add, well, you've went in a lot about early on after your injury when you went back to school. So you've gone through all this, you've learned a lot of things, and what does life look like now for you, Brittany? You have a pretty cool looking life.
My life is if I could have told myself when I was 13 what my life looks like now, I would not have believed it. I really would not have believed it. And it's not like I have like super special things or different than what the average person is, but that was my dream when I was a teenager. It was to live a normal life. And if that is what I could have told myself as a 13-year-old looking, from the future, that I was living a normal life, I wouldn't have believed her, because I wouldn't have thought it was possible. But I am married. I've been married for, oh my gosh, it's like almost 15 years now, which is crazy. To my husband, Joe. I have 2 kids. My son is almost 15, which is insane. And my daughter is almost 11. So they're like a couple months away from their birthdays because their birthdays are close together. Um, I am a part-time teacher, so I teach as a substitute teacher, and I love it. It gets me in the classroom doing what I love with kids. I don't have to do any of the planning, but I get to build relationships with kids, and that's my favorite part. And I get to share my story so many times, and I love finding ways to talk about spinal cord injury and disability and all of the things that kids are curious about, and be a friendly face for them to meet early on so that they have a different perception of what life with a disability can be like. And they take that into their interactions with other people with disabilities. So I love that. I have a YouTube channel that's been kind of I've been plugging away at for 2.5 years now. And I really like doing that. It's grown a lot. I have almost 21,000 subscribers, which is great. And I love being able to share things that have made my life easier, so that people can avoid so many of the wasted years that I went through just trying to figure this life out. What else? I don't know. I was recently on a TV show called Push. It's all about people with disabilities in the Edmonton area, so that's really cool. We are currently filming season 2, so if anybody that's watching this wants to find it, it's on CTV Gem, where you can stream it. So that's cool. Other than that, I don't know. Like, I'm just a mom. I run my kids to sports and play dates. No, well, they don't call it play dates anymore because they're like, preteen and teenagers, but hangouts with their friends. Camping a lot. We have an acreage a couple hours away from here, and we camp there all the time. So just different, like, I guess normal life things, honestly, like normal life things, other than maybe being on a TV show and having a YouTube channel, because I don't know that every normal person wants that stuff, but it's, yeah, normal stuff, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, that's normal for these days.
Yeah, I know,
Um,
right?
I
I
think
feel like
it's
everybody's gonna have some sort of platform.
yeah. Well, and that CBC Gem, right? Not CTV Gem.
Is
Um,
it CBC? Oh my God, it's
yeah,
CBC. Yeah,
CBC.
not CTV.
But and then for those who are curious,
I don't know why I
and
said CTV. It's definitely CBC.
we'll put it in the bio underneath the video. But Brittany's YouTube channel is Empowered Para, so
Yeah.
definitely check it out. And I think I really like it because I remember when I got injured and my dad was all trying to find things, and there was like a Reddit kind of site where you put in your question and other people will answer it, but you have no idea where they're from, who they are, what kind of injury they are. It was a really weird thing. And it was, internet wasn't what it is now when I got injured. So it was kind of like awkward talking to people. It was just it didn't have that comfortability yet. So the fact that you have a video so people can watch videos and see it and really make a connection, I think has been a great ad. And the more you go on YouTube, there's more and more people starting channels to help people with disabilities. So I definitely recommend anybody to do a little bit of YouTube rabbit holing. It helps a long way if you can find somebody that is similar to yourself and you can connect with. It can really give you a teammate on your road
Yeah.
back to recovery. And like you said, the big thing about normal now is the only reason you're there is because you've gotten through
Mhm.
all that experience and come out the other side. And that's the important thing for everybody to remember is that once you've get it all figured out, it's just you're just going pee, you're just going poop,
Yeah, exactly.
you're just going for a walk, you're just doing it. It's not I gotta do my this and this and this.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it becomes second nature, just like if you weren't injured and walking and peeing and
Yeah, it
those
really
things,
does.
it's second nature, right? So
Yeah.
congrats and thank you again so much for joining me for this series and sharing your message. And I really hope people take this video and it helps a lot of people out there getting through their recovery.
Yeah, you're welcome. Happy to be here, and yeah, people know where to find me if they have any questions.